Hi, welcome back to Adventure Capital. Today, Johnny speaks with Chai Mishra, the founder and CEO of Move, a revolutionary new supermarket. After going through Y Combinator in 2017, Move launched a Wefunder campaign, raising $580,000 from 609 investors. In this episode, Chai outlines his vision to build a more equitable and ethical retailer, and shares how his Wefunder investors have become his most valuable customers. Starting with Indian political history and ending with their mutual love of Scott Galloway, here are Johnny and Chai. Chai, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get started maybe with your personal background. Who is Chai Mishra? How did you come to be on this podcast today?
Oh, wow. Already unprepared for the first question. No. As you said, my name is Chai Mishra. I am the founder of a company called Move. My backstory, what led me up to being on this podcast, which undoubtedly is the peak of my life so far.
Thank you.
The way this happened was I grew up in India, and I grew up just to set the right frame for this. I grew up immediately post liberalization, just when India's economy was opening up, and all of a sudden new companies were coming in, and basically everybody was quitting their job at the government and starting.
On that note, just as an aside, what was liberalization in India? Was there one prime minister who said, we're gonna liberalize India here? Or I didn't know that phrase, or that there was kind of a turning point.
Sure. No, this was, and this is kind of a really important sort of inflection point, a kind of a watershed moment in Indian history was 1991. India had followed this really strict policy of being a closed off economy, sort of in the way that Japan was in the 80s and 90s. But this idea of we're going to build homegrown, and we had a bit of a past, as you might be aware of. With allowing
as a Brit, unfortunately, I am aware of that part. And then there was a lot of 5-year plans, right? Like Nehru and post independence. There was a lot of kind of very tight government central planning.
Exactly. I mean, you kind of nailed it. Where the idea was to really prop up homegrown industry and to have exert an incredible amount of central planning and government-owned industry. And the idea was around 1991. We had about a month of. I think the strategy worked in a lot of important ways. I think, and you can sort of compare India to a couple other. There was a second boom of country creation in the 40s, where immediately post World War II, all of these new countries were getting created. And India took a very specific path, and you can kind of look back and look at how that performed against a couple other companies or other countries that are much more open with their economies. But I think it worked out quite well for India. But around the mid 90s, we were out of foreign exchange. We had about a month of foreign exchange left, and the economy was really crumbling. And so at the time, the Indian government decided, they called it LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And they basically transformed India from being a fairly closed off, very central planning, bureaucratic, very parliamentary. I'm just throwing out adjectives that kind of construct the image in my head. This very specific type of economy to being what we see India as now, which is the fastest growing economy in the world.
Capitalist. Yeah,
exactly. And so we did a couple of things. Firstly, the government sold off large parts of industry. So the government of India had a steel department, the government of India had a copper department. That all started getting sold off to private industry. For the very first time, they allowed new brands to enter, or new companies to enter into India. So that, for the generation of kids that I'm a part of, that was a major moment, because we were the generation that saw, and it's weird how this gets embedded into your psyche, and then you start a company 25 years later that does this. We saw, when I was growing up, there was one brand of cereal. Nobody said, I'm going to go get cornflakes, and then somebody would ask you what brand of cornflakes. It was just cornflakes. There were two cars, no joke, the two brands of cars on the streets when I was growing up. And then it went from that to, in about a 5 to 10 year period, all of a sudden there's this huge boom, and all of these new brands came into India, and it really changed around the mid 90s and then sort of early 2000s.
And so it's so interesting to me, to your kind of story, your personal story, and like as the founder of Move, you're kind of starting here in India with this LPG kind of moment. So how important to you, and it's interesting you talk about the psyche there. So I went to Africa before going to university for a year. And, I can sometimes on an interview like this, I'll tie the fact that I went to work for a non-profit at Kiva doing international development to that time in Africa. But actually, I don't know if it was that. Like, do you really think it was like that experience for you as a kid in India is why you're an entrepreneur? Or it's quite interesting to hear you kind of almost start with that as like the narrative that got you to this place.
Well, I think this is another podcast where we need to go into sort of how the role in narratives play and kind of how applicable they are and how much they're sort of construction. And, you know, we should probably invite my therapist on and just, I think that there's definitely a lot to go into regarding that. I think it's a little interesting where I think there's definitely part of it that kind of becomes the way you tell your own story. And me being from more than just being from India, I think it's about a combination, a cross-section of time and place to me, India in the 90s was a very specific place to be. It's in the way that people describe being in San Francisco in the 1960s or something like that. Yeah. It was a very specific occurrence and very specific, again, just time and place to be. So I do think that affects it, but I think the other part of the story that is relevant is how my family was sort of personally involved in that, where around that time, the same year that I was born and the same year that India was going through all this liberalization, my father left his job at the government and started his own business. He started a small trading company out of the basement of our house. And so all of my earliest memories, my mom's a school teacher, was a school teacher at the time. And so she would go have a real job. And my father was running this trading company off the basement of our house. So 100% of my earliest memories are in warehouses and in steel mills and cement plants. And these
like the warehouse you're in now.
Much like the warehouse that I'm in now. And so in that way, you know, with me, the story is almost so heavy-handed. It sounds like bad writing in a movie is because I grew up around them and it just... I feel very comfortable in industrial spaces. This was set off camera right before this. As you said, that where I'm sitting right now seems like the setting of Saw 5. And funny enough, that's how most people would see it. To me, it feels so comfortable. I think because of, again, just the settings of where I grew up, you know, my dad would have to take us, my sister and I, with him on a lot of business trips because we didn't have a babysitter, and we'd just be in the back of the car looking out the window as my dad was meeting with people at, again, a cement plant or something like that. Yeah. And so that kind of got lodged in my head. Fast forward 17 years, I come out to America to go to school. And, you know, I was pretty sure by that point.
To go to school, to go to college?
To go to college, exactly.
Okay. So you were kind of in India all the way through until the age of 18 or so? 17,
yeah, exactly. I did my entire life. I lived in that same house and moved really to go to school and moved directly to San Francisco or to Berkeley. You know, I'm kind of a product of not just that time, but of my father's business and of the very specific industrial suburb of Delhi that my family lived in. And I moved out here and I knew for a fact that I wanted to be really involved in how products were getting made. I was kind of obsessively into the idea of supply chain and sort of how I would find it really fascinating that we're surrounded by all these things and that somebody had to make every single thing and it had to get to us somehow. So that's what I went to school for. I signed up for the mechanical engineering program at UC Berkeley, thinking that I was going to graduate and work in supply chain or something like that. And 6 months in, I started tapping out. I just couldn't do it anymore. 6 months in, it became clear to me that the program was really built towards trying to, as a fast track, to try to get a job at Tesla, much more so try to get a design job at Tesla than what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on a factory floor. I wanted to be in a steel mill somewhere. This can get into my own sort of weird sort of cyberpunk, just whatever kind of art I appreciate. But I do think I find an enormous amount of beauty in manufacturing. I just think it's one of the most gorgeous things ever. If you're a 4-year-old kid and you see iron getting smelted for the first time, or you see you know, liquid metal flowing through a furnace, that's one of the most beautiful. It's just another reality. And I was so obsessed with it, still am, that's what I wanted to do. So I dropped out, 18 years old, and I dropped out of the UC Berkeley mechanical engineering program. I just started working. And my goal at the time was just to work in as many different manufacturing and supply chain jobs as I could. I got lucky that around the time that I was 18 was sort of the first boom of direct-to-consumer. It was really taking off. There were a lot of these companies that started to question the core supply chain of a lot of day-to-day products. And so they started to go, hey, why don't we manufacture our own products and ship them directly to people, that kind of thing. So with no skills and no college degree, I got lucky just because of what the time was. And I was able to get a job working in supply chain. First job I had was in China. I was 18 years old and I moved to Shenzhen. My job was working with American and European startups, so building sort of hardware products and helping them get manufacturing done, helping them get distribution, warehousing, all of that. Basically everything that goes into you deciding that a product needs to exist and then you shipping the very first units of it. So I did that in China. From there, I kind of found myself, just to fast track through the rest of this, I found myself in this really interesting position where I would join the companies that I was working with for 6 months to a year at a time in a new country, completely new supply chain, completely new product. I worked on everything from military grade exoskeletons in America to coffee machines in Germany. And I would spend 6 months to a year in a new city, in a new country. And my whole job would be the same thing. I was with a very specific purpose. I joined the team, it's 5 to 10 people. They have a very specific idea for something they want to build. And they tell me, all right, go get it made. Go get the.
How did you join that team? Like, how did you join the coffee company in Germany? I mean, like, you don't have a college degree. You just like email them, hey, like I want to come work for you, or how does that work?
It's a really great trick, Johnny. It's called lying on your resume a lot. Okay. But no, I was able to, and so the specific story of the coffee company in Germany, I was doing a project for them. So I was working with this company, the one in Shenzhen. Their job would be, you want to build a coffee machine, and they would go out and find the right factory in China and make sure that it got made and the designs were right and all that. And they came in as clients. And I worked with them for a couple months, and they liked me enough, and I liked their mission enough, where I ended up hopping and joining them.
Got it. And so it's kind of relationships that. Oh yeah, it was all particular example.
Pretty early on, I realized I was not going to get picked off a stack of resumes. If I wanted a job, it had to come through relationships, and so that's how that one happened, and that's kind of how all of them happened. One job would lead to the other, and to the other,
and then where does Move come in?
So about 4.5 years into doing that, basically all of the time that I would have spent in college, it started to become clear to me. I was kind of seeing a pattern that a lot of these companies were really focused on trying to talk about the specific value proposition of their coffee or the specific value proposition of their product. And they weren't paying enough attention to the supply chain that made it special in the first place. Like, I was much more interested in the process of how these products were getting made than the products themselves. And so I wanted to start a company that just had a lot to do with that process. I just wanted to start a company that could fundamentally alter or at least re-examine how daily products are getting made and how they're getting brought to people. So I decided to go out, do it on my own, and Move from the very beginning. It's sort of been a unique company. The core idea hasn't actually changed that much. We came out with in early 2017, and the very first idea was, let's build a direct-to-consumer supermarket. Let's build a supermarket that works directly with the greatest people in the world, makes an incredible quality product, and then is able to ship it straight to the consumer and cuts out all the middlemen and cuts out all of the supply chain inefficiencies along the way. So Move was sort of a direct product of working with these companies and not loving how they were approaching them. So that's how it came to be.
And so, tell us more about, what the company, what you guys do. And I think you mentioned it sounds like there's been some iterations along the journey. You've been working on it now for, I guess, three years or so. Give us a high level overview of Move, and then a little on the journey so far.
Absolutely. Move is really the core idea the Move stems from is the sense that commerce, in the way that it's practiced, online or offline, however you want to look at it, is not as good as it can be. We believe that we can take all of commerce and make it more efficient, make it more ethical, and make it more enjoyable. So the question was, how do we go about doing that? One idea that we've really built up on is a sense that currently the way in which commerce works, and you can look at Amazon or you can look at Walmart, and they sort of both work in the same way. It's this marketplace model, this Wild West marketplace where anybody can sell products, and the company just sort of Amazon just sits in the middle, or Walmart just sits in the middle as a facilitator of the transaction. We believe that there's an alternate version of commerce to be built where the company that's selling you the product is the company that made it. That company actually owns the entire supply chain from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And what you can do when you do that, so essentially what I'm saying is Move is like Amazon if everything on Amazon was Amazon branded, and was actually created by Amazon. So the idea,
which Amazon is obviously, and there are supermarkets that have a lot, and it's interesting for me. Like I think of Marks and Spencer in the UK, which is like I think almost all own label. Amazon is kind of more and more is kind of Amazon branded products. So how is it kind of we're doing that, or in that case, then how do you differentiate? Is there a difference in the business model where you kind of you're vertically integrated kind of more than Amazon own branded products are? Or is
No, I think that's an excellent question. I think there's a great analogy over here that I think sort of perfectly highlights what we're thinking about. You can look at smartphones. I think smartphones are a perfect analogy of this. We've been calling it the Cold War that's going to happen in every consumer sector. And what you see when you look at smartphones is, Google has laptops. You can sort of see the Microsoft analogy here. Google says, look, we're going to write the Android software and anybody can make an Android phone. And as a result, there are a lot more Android phones made and sold than iPhones. At the same time, Apple comes along and says, no, we're going to make the software. We're going to make the hardware. We're going to make the store. We're going to own every.
So you're Apple to Amazon's Google.
Exactly. Yeah. We're hoping to build the iPhone for commerce.
And when you say Cold War, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. This is my favorite.
Do you mean like Amazon is capitalism and you're the Soviet Union? Because it almost like, going back to what you said earlier about kind of pre-LPG India, there's like one brand of cornflakes and that's, there's the Move brand of cornflakes, right?
That's fair. Yeah. I think.
So what did you mean by the Cold War?
I think the Cold War is that we're going to see it's about two conflicting ideologies. That's the sense in which
got it.
I wouldn't call us the Soviet Union, but
I know. I was like, I doubt that's what Chai meant by that. Yeah.
No, but I do think that you're onto the right point here, which is the conflicting ideologies are, and you see this happening with social media right now too. Is you're going to see one camp appear that says, hey, what we stand for is the maximum variety and the lowest prices possible. And that's the Amazon camp. That's the Android camp. And in return, you're paying for a little bit of your privacy or a little bit of your ethics around supply chain, a little bit of sort of the brand and kind of how you feel about it. You're paying for it in all of these other ways, but you're not paying for it with cash. And then there's another camp that says, no, we're going to deliver an incredible customer experience, an incredibly ethical supply chain, an incredibly compelling brand vision. But it's going to cost a little bit more. I think you're seeing the same thing appear with smartphones, of course, the Android and iPhone. You see the same thing with laptops, the Mac and the whatever. I think you're seeing the same thing with social media. Facebook has clearly taken a path of wanting to be, hey, we're going to be the open-ended marketplace and anybody can post anything. We will not correct any. We have nothing to say about it. It's a Wild West marketplace of information. But then Twitter comes along and I think you're seeing them go towards this. They're thinking more and more about a paid version of Twitter. Authenticated identity. And I think there are a lot of people doing, I don't want to make this about Twitter. There are a lot of people doing compelling work around that. You've interviewed some of them. I really think that what you're going to see with social media as well as the same idea is that there's the open-ended, cheap, free marketplace model where you are sort of signing up to have your privacy invaded and signing up to see a lot of false information, but you don't pay anything for it. And there's a paid version where it's in line with your ethics. The customer experience is dramatically better. And that's the analogy we see over here. We understand, let's go back to the smartphone idea, and I think we can apply it to commerce. iPhones are only about 14 to 15% of the phones sold in the world, but they make up for about 50 to 60% of the profits in the industry. And I would say an even larger amount of the thought leadership and a larger amount of the significance in the market. Right. Yeah. Similarly, we don't think that we're going to be selling more product than Amazon because we're not interested in selling knockoff Gucci. And we're not interested in selling a lot of the crap that is sold on Amazon, a lot of the crap that's sold in Walmart. But what we do believe is that we can sell to a much smaller portion, sell fewer products to fewer people, but still capture a lot more of the thought leadership and hopefully capture a lot more of the profit in the industry. So what we're trying to build is we're not trying to put Amazon or anybody out of business. All we think is that it's ridiculous that e-commerce, I believe, is the most important industry in the world, and that it is almost half of it is owned by one company. If there was ever a sign of market failure, it's right there.
Yeah,
that the most
interesting timing with Bezos appearing in front of Congress last week. Right? Do you think they're gonna break them up?
I hope they do. I think it's.
Seems so. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were like, basically, Bernie Sanders said, "Let's break them up," and Trump said, "Break them up." And if this is like, it's that bipartisan, like it seems. What was that?
Were you listening to Pivot?
Yeah.
I love
like
that
Pivot. Scott Galloway. He's a smart
the
dude.
greatest.
Smart dude.
The greatest.
I mean, second greatest podcast taste. After obviously President Galloway excluded.
Pivot plug. Did you, by the way, listen? Scott Galloway did a Wefunder plug recently.
What on
Did
Pivot?
What?
I love it. That's amazing. I've got to. You gotta. But yeah, we need to get him.
We don't want to be sending free listeners to any other podcast. This is
that's right. Stay on a venture capital. You're good. Okay, so that's an awesome articulation of the vision and the kind of, I guess, the Apple to Amazon's Android, and the kind of quality and also kind of ethical sourcing and supply chain versus the kind of the paradox of choice and just kind of mass proliferation of stuff that you'll find in a Walmart or on Amazon's virtual shelves. So I guess transitioning a little, that's the vision. Tell us about how it's been going. So you raised on Wefunder, what was it, about a year ago? You launched it soon afterwards. You then coronavirus hit. Tell us, give us the journey of the Wefunder raise and then how things have been going since then.
Yeah. So a lot has happened in the last year.
Understatement of the century.
It's been an eventful year for all of us. So we launched on Wefunder almost exactly a year ago. And we came out of that campaign with a group of really dedicated investors, but also members in the store. An important detail about Move is not only do we not sell everything, not only do we not sell from every producer, we also don't sell to everyone. We are a members-only store. And so Wefunder gave us our first group of members. We ended up selling quite a few memberships on Wefunder and, of course, ownership in the company.
Is that why you decided to raise capital on Wefunder?
Exactly. This was sort of going to be my punchline for the whole podcast, but this is I'm glad we got to it, which is that an important point of making commerce more ethical when we talk about the iPhone and the Android or whatever. One of the most important points of making commerce more ethical is to try to make a supply chain that works for everyone in the supply chain. There are two parts to that we see. One thing is being pricing, making pricing incredibly fair, incredibly transparent. So on Move, everyone can see exactly how much money the producer makes and who the producer is, exactly how much money the warehouse worker makes and who the warehouse worker is and how much profit we make. So that's part one. Part two, and where Wefunder comes in, why we started off, our very first memberships were all sold on Wefunder, is that we have to make ownership public. In the last 2 years, just think about this. In the last 60 years or so, in the last 6 decades, the two largest retailers in America produce the richest man in the world and the richest family in the world. That's what they produce. And they've done that off of the backs of
Amazon and Walmart.
Exactly. And they've done that off the backs of the lowest paid workers. Walmart puts more people on, puts more employees on food stamps than any other company in the world. They've done that off the backs of the lowest paid workers, whether it's a grocery store cashier or a warehouse worker, and the most exploited producers. There is why I believe Amazon should be broken up. There is no single company more detrimental to the health of small businesses selling online than Amazon. There are so many bodies in that graveyard that Amazon leaves behind. It's ridiculous.
And it's interesting. I think your point here is a concentrated ownership model is leading to kind of societally detrimental outcomes. I think one thing that's kind of interesting for me working for Wefunder is you said it, the richest man and the richest family in the world. Imagine if. I guess they're the founders, so it's a little bit different. But there's a lot of investors. There's a lot of venture capitalist investors that have made a lot of money in Amazon and Walmart too, right? And so imagine if that wealth was kind of also being shared around
Exactly.
kind of individual investors through a platform like Wefunder. I give one example of Jason Canis, who invested 25K in Uber and made 125 million in the IPO, so 5,000x return. But imagine if like his 25K initial investment had come from 125 people putting $200 in. Now you have 125 new millionaires as opposed to one existing millionaire having 125 million more.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just nailed it. That's exactly it. And I think there's no better application for a communal ownership model than commerce, because people get to not only be owners in the model, they get to be active participants in the growth of the model. Right?
Have you seen that? Like, have you seen any example? I read a blog post recently about Neurohacker, which does DTC, sell DTC, and so they gave me their sales data. And I was able to basically map that to investor data. And we saw, okay, you have a lot of new customers who were not previously customers invested. And similarly, once your existing customers invested, then they have a lot higher LTV going forward, lower churn. So do you have any like anecdotes or data there, or is it just kind of, it's more of a vision?
No, we've seen this. The data is really interesting and sort of strong here. Where so we in total, just to go back to the story piece over here, we sold 5,000 years of membership in the last 3 months of 2019. That was split between the Wefunder campaign and then just general sales on our own website and sort of other non-equity crowdfunding platforms. That was the last quarter of 2019. Since then, in the beginning of this year, we began letting people into the store. We sold these memberships and we started letting people into the store. So we now have about 5 months since mid-February of 2020. We have 5 months of sales data. And what we've seen is that a person is dramatically more likely to make frequent orders, to stick with the service even if there's a problem, to refer new people onto our wait list if they're an owner in the company than if they're not.
That's awesome.
Our Wefunder backers are, I mean, without a doubt, doesn't matter what metric you look at, the greatest customers we have. And I think
that. That's just the title of the episode. That's a tweet. Our Wefunder backers are the greatest customers we have. Period. End of interview. Let's call it. We're done.
I think I just want to kind of pull out one more interesting sort of data point over here that I think really matters. You know, we understand something about our model, and I think we were trying to talk about this earlier. We are not going to win the battle of users. That's not a battle to be won. We have a company, again, because you're a Scott Galloway fan, I'm going to rat off some Scott Gallowayisms. More people have an Amazon Prime membership than have landline connections or than have cable networks, cable connections in America. We're not going to win the battle of getting a Move membership to more households than have Amazon Prime memberships. Same way, iPhone's never going to sell, or Apple's never going to sell more phones than Android phones. Android's going to win because there are just more Android phones made. But what we can win on is how those individual members interact with Move. So what we're already seeing is that the average Move member spends double the amount every year than the average Amazon customer does. And this is off the back of 125 products. That's all that we sell right now. And so as we start to add more categories, as we start to add more products, we expect that number to really grow. So we're really staking our claim on a small group of incredibly dedicated members. We're really not trying to, for reference over here, we have 130,000 people on our wait list to become members. And we're not letting them in because we are more interested in getting these members the greatest experience we can. And in financial, purely business terms, in trying to get them to a place where they're making all of their purchases through Move, as opposed to just trying to get more people who give us $10 a month. We're more focused on getting more usage instead of more users.
Got it. Love it.
So Wefunder is the greatest way to do that. Just kind of the last thing I would say about this, just think about the idea. I see this a lot with our Wefunder backers. I'm in touch with a lot of them. I text back and forth once a week or something, and they make some of the largest orders on Move, and they keep making those orders. So imagine giving $10,000 to a company. Imagine investing $10,000 into a company and then also ordering $250 worth of groceries every single week, right? And the reason that they're doing that, the reason that that's not excessive is, and I've heard this from at least a dozen people now that invest in the Wefunders, it feels like giving money to your own company. Because when buying products, to them it feels very similar to when I make an order on Move, as it should, which is it doesn't feel like I'm being extravagant. It doesn't feel like an expense. It just feels like the right thing to do. I need to buy groceries. Where else am I going to buy them? First, I'm going to get them on Move. So that's a really, really interesting data point over here, where I think the way in which our Wefunder backers interact with Move is fundamentally different from how other members interact with Move. We have great members all around, but Wefunder is truly the source of all of the greatest Move members we have. And last thing I'd throw out there is our top 100 customers, our top 100 members in the last 5 months have spent roughly $75,000 on Move. And that's what it is. And I would be willing to bet that a big majority of them are actually Wefunder backers. So anyway, that's
awesome. Love hearing that. That is very much our vision, right? And I'm always saying, like, if you're a consumer-facing company, like you've really got to consider carefully running an equity crowdfunding campaign at this point.
Yeah.
And so, you'll have to share that data with me. I'd love to do a case study on that specifically at some point, maybe. But so a couple of last questions here. Firstly, how have you guys been affected by coronavirus?
Yeah. So we had there's a lot of talk at the beginning of the virus around people wanted to talk about coronavirus on their social media, but they didn't want to become a coronavirus company or whatever it was that people were afraid of. With us, honestly, we were born directly into the pandemic. We started shipping in the last week of February. That was when February 26th, I believe, was when the very first Move boxes went out.
Wow.
And by mid-March, the whole country was in lockdown. Yeah. So, our history tracks so perfectly with the history of coronavirus. That in some ways, we don't really even have any data that's non-coronavirus data. But here's how it's affected us. On one side, demand has been understandably increased. And we saw in the early days of it, we saw some pretty crazy stockpiling happening. People, which is sort of funny given the types of products we sell. People, buying 20 things of matcha or 20 things of jam or something. It's pretty funny. We got that. We saw, we already see a very large average order. But then especially in the first weeks of the pandemic, we were seeing orders. Our largest order any given week was about $1,200 or something. $1,200 on groceries is a lot of money.
I would have thought the demand side would be like very, as I would have thought you guys would do well through that as a remote online supermarket, but I would have thought the supply chain would have massive issues.
Precisely. Yeah. So demand has done incredibly well, and at the same time, supply has been very difficult. We got to this place around mid-April where, and again, demand plays into supply, so it's they're not fully separable. But we got to this place where about 80% of our store was sold out. It was impossible to get products manufactured and into the warehouse. If you just sort of go back into the supply chain, just looking at, even if the person that makes our pasta sauce was still able to cook pasta sauce, the jars that they put it in came from China and they're not manufacturing anymore. And then even if they were able to make it and put it in the jar, FedEx freight wasn't operating, and all kinds of problems basically throughout. Every step of the global supply chain broke down, and we felt every step of it. So that was very challenging, especially in a time with incredible demand to not have supply. And we made a decision at the time as a company. There was a lot of talk around, if you think back to mid-April, there was a lot of talk about how there's a land grab going on for online grocery. Online grocery, an interesting data point here is it is both the largest consumer sector in the world, and it is also the fastest digitizing sector in the world, which is very interesting. Grocery, rather, is the largest and the fastest digitizing, which never happens. When do you have the largest sector that's also the fastest growing? So there was a lot of talk about how there's a land grab for online grocery, and you need to be spending as much money as possible acquiring customers. And we made a decision as a team to say, no, there is a land grab going on, but it's not a land grab for demand. It's a land grab for supply. What matters right now is if we can build a COVID-proof supply chain such that when this pandemic is over, we have the greatest service, we have the greatest offering.
That's another Scott Galloway ism, right? He's talked about Amazon investing in a COVID-proof supply chain as well.
I believe he has, and I think anyone that isn't doing that is really kind of making a big mistake. But I think from our perspective, we still think that Amazon is the way that they have to go about doing this. They still have to. It's about editing their existing model, right? Because I'll give you a standard example, which is an Amazon distribution center is laid out in the way that it's laid out, which is that it's got 7 million or so products on the site. People need to be able to, so you have one person that's packing an order needs to move around the warehouse, pull everything together and get it into one box and ship it out. They're locked into those systems. They can edit things. They can add better testing. They can do things like that. But the fundamentals of the supply chain or the fundamentals of the pick and pack, for example, are not built in a COVID-friendly way. We have the opportunity, because we're, again, born into the pandemic, we have an opportunity to account with the benefit of the knowledge of COVID. So what we're doing, for example, is, again, land grab for supply. So we moved to a model where we just focus entirely on launching new products, bringing products back into stock, and opening distribution centers. We've opened up one in San Francisco, a pretty large one just south of the city. And then we're opening up another one next month right outside of New York City. And we've got a couple more in the pipeline. And the entire idea right now is to build in a way that's completely COVID-proof, whether it's the architecture inside the warehouse or the supply chain around it. We're doing a lot to fund, essentially to write preemptive checks to our producers to make sure they can keep the lights on, or doing things like getting in to their production timeline, where a lot of our producers are restaurants. So the downtime that they're having, can we use their kitchen in that time to get products made, that kind of stuff. So I do think that there's a difference where right now, anyone that's trying to adapt, any retailer that's trying to adapt to COVID is editing something huge that they've already built. It's the same reason that old retailers weren't able to compete when e-commerce came about, was because they had this humongous infrastructure of stores. And it would have required dismantling the whole thing and rebuilding warehouses. Similarly, Amazon or any e-commerce retailer is pretty locked into the system that they have, unless they scrap that and start over. So we have the opportunity here where we can build with the knowledge of COVID. But yeah, so we think it's a land grab for supply. We think our entire focus right now should be building a better supply chain. So that's what we're doing. We're supporting producers. We're building new distribution centers in a way that's staunchly anti-COVID. And then finally, we're restricting the number of members that can get access to the store. The fewer the members we have, the better access we can give those members to fairly sought after products that basically you can't get anywhere else. So anyway, that's how we're thinking about it.
Very cool. I love it. We're kind of over time, so just a couple of questions we ask everyone who comes on to round us out here. First is a piece of advice for a founder who's considering running an equity crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, I would say think about it in a way larger than just fundraising. Think about it, that was a terrible sentence. Think about it as more than just fundraising. Here's the simple math that I would throw out. In our case, and in the case of any direct-to-consumer brand, anybody that's selling products online, your two largest expenses are marketing and inventory. In our case, let's say I go out and raise $1 of venture capital funding. I then need to split that up 50-50 across inventory and marketing. When I go out and raise $1 of equity crowdfunding, those the 50 cents of inventory and marketing are gone, and it can all go to inventory. So as a result, you're growing at least twice as fast, and you're saving the 50% that would have gone to marketing. So
Wefunder, grow twice as fast as if you raise with venture capital. That's our new tagline.
It's entirely true. I think that you just need to understand, if you're thinking about raising equity crowdfunding, an important data point here is $1 in equity crowdfunding is dramatically more valuable than $1 of venture capital or $1 of angel investing, whatever. And the last point I would kind of throw out there is this is always a sign of an industry that's lost its best selling points. And this is what you see with venture capital. When they make it about pedigree and when they make it about premium branding. So a lot of venture capitalists will tell you that it doesn't look good when you raise equity crowdfunding, or, it's the badge that comes from raising from X and Y venture capitalists. They've lost all hope. They've lost all other ways of differentiating themselves. So now they've made it about branding. They've made it about looking cool, and that the actual math isn't in their favor.
That's an interesting, I've never heard that before. It's an interesting take. And then last kind of question would be one piece of advice for a founder more generally, like anyone starting a company, growing a company, one piece of advice.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm always very cautious giving advice to founders because it's so unique to each person. I would really say be very, very, very thoughtful about why you're starting the company. And really, I think it's worth spending a lot of time before you start the company just thinking about why you're starting it, not what you're going to do and not how you're going to do it. Spend a lot of time on the why for why you're starting this company. And the simple reason for it is it doesn't matter who you are and doesn't matter how good you are at what you do. You are going to reach a point when it's incredibly easy to quit and incredibly hard to keep going. And the only thing that could really pull you out of that, it's not going to be more money. It's not going to be any of that. You reach these incredibly dark moments in the life of a company. And the only thing that can pull you out of it is just I wrote it down and I look at it often of why you started the company, why you believe that this is the right thing to do.
Give us your why for Move. I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but that would be a beautiful note to end on.
Sure. Well, I believe, because of my upbringing and because of my background, I believe commerce is the most beautiful representation of human collaboration and human interaction. And I believe at the same time that commerce can get quite easily corrupted and can become a tool for exerting power and for exploiting one person for the benefit of the other. So I see it as my job, and I see it as my company's job, to make a better, fairer version of commerce that can return it to that sort of beautiful expression of human collaboration. So I see what Move does, and I see the only thing I'm interested in being involved in my life is trying to make commerce more ethical and trying to make commerce fairer to everyone that's involved. So yeah, that's why I keep doing it. And I think I am able to look back in the darkest moments and go, all right, well, is commerce any fairer today than when I started? And unfortunately, the answer is always no. It seems to only have gone further down the path of what I hate. So I keep going. And that gets me through days when it feels like we're going to run out of money, or days when it feels like it's just more work than I can handle. It gets me through all of that. Is the why is very important. So I would say to any founder, be very clear about it and make sure you spend the time to remove your ego from it. Make sure that you're able to see your ambition minus the ego of just wanting to be famous and minus the ego elements of wanting to have a lot of money. Those are important and valuable things to have, but you need to be able to articulate very clearly to yourself and to no one else why the hell you're doing this. And so that would be my one advice to founders.
That's what a great note to end on. And thanks so much. We've covered a lot of ground, from Indian politics to Apple versus Google as applied to commerce, and the challenges of coronavirus. I loved what you said about your Wefunder investors being your most kind of valued and revenue generating customers. And then lastly, the why is a really awesome note to end on. So Chai, thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure to interview you, man.
Chai Mishra is the founder and CEO of Move, and Johnny Price is the head of fundraising here at Wefunder. If you'd like to find out more about Move, visit shopmove.co. Adventure Capital is, of course, brought to you by your fundraising team here at Wefunder. We thank you for listening, and next week we'll speak with Maxime Tuchman, the founder of Caribou.